Right, it's about that time to take a walk into the world of the headlines, the stories making the rounds in the national dailies across Nigeria. Welcome to Freshly Pressed on the Smooth Breakfast, right here on Smooth 98.1, your love music, love live station, 31 minutes past 7 a.m., the 5th day of May, 2025. And yours truly is Ayokunmi. Great to have you join us once again for the first episode of the first installment of the show for the week. Looking forward to starting with all the fireworks, bringing you all the necessary information and, of course, analysis. Your thoughts and contributions will follow as well. And talking about your thoughts and contributions, you can send them in to us on WhatsApp. That's one way to do it. The number is 0809 444 0809 444 That is the WhatsApp number. We're also on YouTube. We're streaming live at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. Smooth 981 FM Lagos. You can join us there as well. You can leave your comments in the chat box, and they will be taken along the WhatsApp messages. Joining me to start the week on a high note to give their analysis and break things all down for us. Mr. C and Amy Bozimo are in the building. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Amy. Good morning, Lagos.
Hi, good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Mr. C, and good morning to all of the wonderful listeners out there. Great to join you.
Great to actually have you on the show, AB. Like I said, looking forward to all the fireworks that are, in the stories this morning. Mr. C, let's begin our journey talking about Meta, the owners of Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and so on and so forth. Now, this is going to be a double header here, so stay with me on this one. Now, Meta's threat to shut down Facebook and Instagram in Nigeria following the $290 million fine imposed by three regulatory agencies in the country brings to light a complex struggle between global tech giants and national regulators. Now, while Meta's stance has sparked significant debate, it raises important questions about digital sovereignty, data privacy, and the balance of power between governments and corporations. Now, clearly, this particular development reflects a critical moment in the ongoing discourse over how digital platforms should be governed in an increasingly interconnected and rapidly evolving global landscape. The government of Nigeria have said, y'all are going to pay this fine. We're standing firm, and this is how we're going to do it. And Meta has have said we're threatening to shut down these platforms in the country. Is this a case of when the two elephants fight, the grass is going to suffer?
Okay, thank you, Ayo. So this is just cyber rhetoric from both ends. Now let me go back so we understand how we got here. Globally, there's this discourse, there's this argument or debate about the effect of big corporations vis-a-vis constitutionally elected governments. So all across the Western world, you find that entities such as Google, such as Microsoft, and now Meta are facing increasing scrutiny from regulators, both in Europe and the Western Hemisphere. And in most cases, and even in Asia, and in most cases, after proper investigations have been carried out and matters have been tried, these entities have been fined. Now, in Nigeria, three bodies here fined Meta a cumulative total of 290 million US dollars. Why? They were established to have breached local data privacy laws, breached advertising rules, and had little or no regard for local Nigerian laws and regulations. Now, having said that, Meta is saying that it finds the fines excessive and are threatening to pull out. Now, to properly analyze this, there's a legal perspective, there's a moral perspective, there's a business perspective. Now, from a business perspective, at least 12 to 15 million Nigerians on a daily basis use the services or the platforms provided by Meta, which include WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. Now, particularly for Instagram and Facebook, you find that businesses have so integrated their systems and their advertising arrangements into these platforms that it will be difficult for them to thrive properly in the absence of these digital platforms. Now, take WhatsApp. More Nigerians increasingly on a daily basis use WhatsApp as their primary mode of communication as opposed to local voice calls because it is cheaper to do that. Now, with all of this, the Nigerian government will argue that from a business perspective, Meta is bluffing, that it cannot leave because of the substantial customer base. From that same business perspective, Meta will say that in the grand scheme of things, looking at our global operations, we're too insignificant and we want to make a point to the African continent. Now, there's a moral argument that this is a government that has consistently failed its people. And now the one thing that they are using to try and make sense out of the disorder and chaos that is life in Nigeria today is being threatened to be taken away from them. And they are arguing, is this government determined to ensure that one, people don't have the freedom to express their opinions, which in most cases are critical of government policies and rules? Two, are they trying to cripple small and medium businesses that are trying to make ends meet using social media? Now, flip the moral argument. The moral argument is Meta cannot come to Nigeria and bully the Nigerian government because in other climes, such as the US, such as Europe, such as South Korea, they have been fined and they have complied with those fines. There has been no dispute. So, what is the big picture here? What is the issue here? Now, let's go to the elephant in the room, which is the legal issue. From a legal perspective, Nigeria has the right to impose rules, laws, and regulations concerning activities within Nigeria. We now have our data privacy laws, and the regulators have found, especially the Federal Consumer and Competition Protection Council, that Meta has not been complying with local data privacy laws, and that some of the options open to us for privacy, data privacy, are inconsistent with the provisions that are available to users in other regions. Now, like I said, because of want of time, it's saber racking from both camps. There's a middle of the ground approach. Set up a high-powered commission populated by representatives from the government through the regulators, civil society organizations, and Meta. Now, what is that body supposed to do? It's supposed to enhance dialogue and negotiation, which will include making clear what the regulatory landscape is. Now, when it makes clear what the regulatory landscape is, it promotes the harmonization of regulatory provisions. It would also ensure that whatever is agreed on can be implemented in phases. And then if Meta needs help in complying with the agreement, they will be provided the help. Now, it's important that both parties realize they need each other. Nigeria cannot do without Meta today, sadly, because we don't even have the local alternatives. Contrast that with China. China has local alternatives from WhatsApp to IG to Facebook. So if Meta wouldn't try that sort of bluff with China. But they can do it here because they know we have no ready-made, no readily available alternative.
So it's a see-finish situation, kind of.
In a sense. So what is needed is a handshake between the Nigerian government and Meta. They need each other. We need to grow our economy. We need to grow the physical economy. We need to grow the digital economy. And we can only do that if these platforms are up and running, social media is running. Because right now the world is a global village. Ideas are no longer local per se.
True.
So, and if we're to instill confidence in our economy to attract foreign investors, we need to get this right with Meta. And another thing that high-powered commission will do will be provide a forum and a mechanism for resolving any disputes that may arise without having necessarily to go through the legal system. So this is a clarion call. I believe that saner heads, cooler heads will prevail, and a middle of the road approach will be reached.
All right, let's see if a middle of the road approach will be reached, and common sense at the end of the day will prevail, because hey, it's a very beneficial relationship between both parties. And let's see how that one goes. We'll be keeping our eyes firmly placed on that one. All right, Evie, let's keep the ball rolling here and step into the Guardian, where the World Bank have been speaking once again. They've been very vocal recently. There was a report that came out a couple of weeks ago talking about Nigeria. Now, there's another one here where they've revealed that rural poverty in Nigeria has reached 75.5%, with the country's most vulnerable populations bearing the brunt of economic stagnation, insecurity, and persistent inflation. Now, in its April 2025 poverty and equity brief for Nigeria, the bank said the poverty rate among Nigeria's rural population is almost double that of urban dwellers, where 41.3% are classified as poor. The data was drawn from Nigeria's most recent nationally representative household surveys. Maybe when we talk about Nigeria and all that, we tend to not bring in the rural community into the conversation. There's this huge focus on what goes on in the big cities and so on and so forth. But according to the World Bank, about 75.5% of Nigerians living in the rural areas are poor. That is a staggering figure.
That's an A in poverty. That's not the kind of place you want to get an A. And part of the story says that since 2018/19, an additional 42 million people fell into poverty. Who was in charge then? President Muhammadu Buhari, GFCR, whatever that acronym is. GCFR, one of the most inept and incompetent presidents Nigeria has ever had the opportunity to have. And the current president said he was going to follow in that inept person's footsteps. And so it has fallen even further. There is a divide, it seems, between the northern geopolitical zone and the southern, where you have 46.5% compared to 13.5%. 46 versus 13. It is over 3 times worse in the north. And what's ironic, because you have to put it in context, is that pound for pound, the north has had more opportunities for leadership in Nigeria over the past years. So this story, it's a numbers story. I think it's worth going to read for the facts. But this story is fundamentally a story of incompetent leadership. And they talk about how part of the thing that are causing it is Nigeria's dependence on oil. I disagree. Oil is not a bad thing to depend on. Lack of job creation. I disagree. It's lack of creativity in leadership. Limited productivity. Clearly, that's the case because they have not even been able to bring us electricity. And then limited productivity in agriculture. How do people who go to farm and get murdered on their farms become productive? Again, it's leadership failure to secure the country. And when you go through it, it's the same World Bank that has talked about how the current reforms are creating stability. The same World Bank never points out that in the United States, where they are located in K Street in Washington, D.C., the United States also has subsidies. Each time they keep praising Nigeria for removing subsidies, but don't talk about the subsidies in America on agriculture, subsidies in energy, and so on. So I just find, while I am very unhappy about the poverty statistics, the story is never complete, and that I think is very deliberate. I am the first to say there is too much ineptitude and incompetence at the federal, state, and local government levels of governance in Nigeria. That is a fact. But this World Bank report, I always say, is an indicator. There is an opportunity. If more competence were brought to bear, these poverty statistics could be rolled back. I just found it very particularly troubling that the country was never a heaven, but it was going in a correct or in a better trajectory until the coming of President Muhammadu Buhari and whatever that all meant. Since then, we became the proud bearers of the world poverty capital for a long time. Then India raced ahead of us. I think we're in a very strong number 2 position. Those are not the kind of statistics anybody wants. They're talking about how out-of-school children are still there. Limited access to drinking water. Drinking water is one of the most elementary things anybody, I will start at the local government, at the state government especially, and perhaps at the federal government. I'm not even looking at federal government. What are state governors doing with their huge budgets that they always announce if you cannot provide drinking water? And what it does is that it causes disease. When you don't have good water, you have increased disease. You don't have healthy people, you have lower productivity and absenteeism. It's a very vicious cycle and it can be broken with one iota, one element of good sense and leadership, which we are sadly lacking. So I see these statistics. They talk about how government has rolled out temporary cash transfers for 50 million households. There's nothing more grotesque than the sight of a government official standing behind a rubber table with piles of naira notes, giving the recipients the indignity of receiving them. They also give out money in America, I should mention that, but they do it through what could be the equivalent of our national identity number. So let us dignify the people. If you have got to give money, let it go through a system that cannot be corrupted. If you tell a typical Nigerian official to go and give 40 million to people, does the 40 million really reach the people? That's the question. But if it's directly put into their account, I think there's more of a chance of that. It doesn't mean that you cannot insist on something more coming back, but at least let's know the records are being kept. So this record just says, the government, Nigeria should strengthen social protection systems, invest in human capital development through education, health, and infrastructure, etc. All these are big story. Nigerian officials should stop being the number one source of national waste and the number one direction where national subsidies are being given. Look, in the US, bad, government officials are not subsidized. In fact, in Washington, D.C., you find certain legislators having to share an apartment just because they cannot afford an apartment by themselves. In Nigeria, everybody must have a house, have bulletproof cars, That's why I say we are subsidizing the lives of the rich, famous, and in some instances, foolish that consider themselves to be our national leadership. It is that foolishness that's leading to this poverty and not many of the other things. People in desert countries create agriculture. Take Israel. People who have oil have prosperity, Saudi Arabia. So all these things that they're saying are actually not the point. The point is the leadership of Nigeria is inept, incompetent, and largely insulated from the real problems of Nigerians, both at the rural area, as this story talks about, and even in the urban areas. That is the problem. Get competent leadership and poverty will be rolled back. Put incompetent leadership in place like we did when Buhari entered and poverty will be increased.
Okay, so for the benefit of our listeners, I will summarize everything Yabi has said in one sentence. Mediocrity has been the continuing bane of Nigeria since independence.
All right, thank you. Should I say, rolling that in a nutshell for us, Mr. C? Let me take a message here on WhatsApp. Daniela from Lagos Island says to Mr. C, the Meta fine is okay and in order. Meta won't leave, and if they do leave, they'll be damaging their brand and eroding shareholder value. Also, nothing will happen if they are fined. Nigerians will be fined and alternatives used. Meta needs to stop sharing people's info without their express permission. No arguments about that. Nobody's saying that they shouldn't be fined or what they did wasn't wrong at the end of the day. What we're saying is, looking at the relationship between Meta and Nigeria, can some sort of agreement be found at the end of the day? Is what we're talking about. Nobody said what they've done is it wrong or whether they should be fine or not be fine. Really and truly, I mean, that's my take on the matter in this case. Emeka says, well said, 75% is indeed excellence in poverty. In a country where during the president's recent state visit in the north, I counted over 70 cars in his convoy, and then there were poverty-stricken people waving Nigerian flags as the president. Now, I understood why there's a deliberate attempt to keep people poor. All right, let's get back into the stories, Mr. C. Let's take a look at matters concerning electricity and or power. Stepping into the premium times, it says the federal government has pledged to address the 4 trillion naira debt owed to the power generation companies. That's the Gencos in the country. Now, in a statement on Sunday evening, Bola Tunji, Special Advisor on Strategic Communication and Media Relations to the Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, said this commitment follows high-stake talks between the minister and chairpersons of the Gencos. I mean, addressing a 4 trillion naira debt, all well and good, but then you begin to ask, how exactly is this supposed to happen, and when exactly is this supposed to take place?
Thank you, Ayo. So there are just so many questions with this story. There's so many questions with Nigeria's electricity industry, and I'll try to do the best I can within the amount of time available. So from the story, the Minister of Power met with the heads of the various generating companies and assured them that the existing 4 trillion naira debt owed to generating companies will be addressed as follows: that the Nigerian government will pay a substantial amount, the figure was not provided, and that the balance after the significant amount is paid will then be paid via the issuance of promissory notes. In a nutshell, what that means is the Nigerian government is planning to pile on more debt to resolve the situation. Now, the first question I have for the Minister of Power and the Gencos is the substantial amounts that will be paid. Where is it coming from? Because we're looking at a 4 trillion naira debt. So a substantial amount should be at least 50%. That is reasonable. So we're looking at 2 trillion naira to be paid. Can the Nigerian government, through any of its 11 spokespersons, convince Nigerians that there's 2 trillion naira sitting down somewhere, not being used, that will be deployed to this debt? Can they do that? Can they come on national TV and even pretend to lie about that? Now, more importantly, beyond paying the debt, there's something substantially still wrong with our electricity industry, from the point of generation through transmission to distribution. And this is made very evident by the fact that the seat of power is planning to get off the grid. Now, in terms of optics, that is very bad, because you are telling the rest of Nigerians the grid is good for you, but it's not good for us. Now, we are all aware that a substantial amount of investment needs to be made in the electricity industry.
Definitely.
At the last count, it was at least $10 billion a year for 10 years. Has any of that investment started? Is the government addressing that? Every day, more manufacturing companies are jumping off the grid and setting up their own plants. Now, if the manufacturing plants who should use the grid are not there, who will then be in a position to afford the power? And we then notice that some individual households are now moving off the grid. So by the time everyone jumps off the grid, or everyone who can afford to jump off the grid jumps off, who's left? The people left, can they then pay for the power being generated by the generating companies?
Power in itself that isn't even sufficient or stable.
Yes. So yes, we have a fundamental problem with our model for the electricity industry. That is not being addressed. I assure you, even if a rich billionaire from America decides, okay, you know what, I'm going to pay you guys off, we're still going to have issues.
Because the structure is lopsided already.
You have a transmission system that is now disturbed. It no longer breaks down, it's now disturbed. That is not being addressed. And if it's being addressed, it's not being addressed as quickly as possible. So where does that leave the average Nigerian? We want to become an industrial nation. The president wants to grow the country into a $1 trillion economy. With this power industry, I have my doubts.
You know, did I hear Mr. C say that there are 11 spokespeople
Yes,
for the government?
Yes.
So that's maybe that's part of where the 4 trillion naira debt came from, paying so many people for nothing. Secondly, we have 4 trillion. How did that debt actually arise? Because where is the power that was earning that debt? I have not seen it in my life. Oh, let's go.
This is okay. Let me take another message here on WhatsApp. I think this is from Don Kelvin. If I got accurately, it says the Minister of Power Bank, like all other ministers, has no plans. He just comes out to make blanket unsubstantiable statements. All right. Therefore, in Joku says, 4 trillion naira debt is ridiculous. Enugu has surplus coal, enough plenty of sunlight for solar energy. Niger Delta water is everywhere and so on. Let each region produce its electricity so that we can finally move forward and stop depending on Abuja, whose official residents and powers that be can't see beyond their respective noses. All right, let's get back into the stories this morning, AB. Let's step into the Punch newspaper, where the House of Representatives Committee on Public Petitions has summoned Governors Hassan Aliya and Dauda Lawal of Benue and Zamfara states, respectively, as well as the respective state assemblies to appear before it on Thursday, that's May 8th. Now, the Punch gathered that the summons was in connection to the rising insecurity in the state, which prompted a civil rights organization, Guardians of Democracy and Rule of Law, to petition the Green Chamber. AB, I'll let you take it from here because of time.
Very quickly. First of all, I've already expressed my opinion about the National Nigerian House of Representatives and my perception of their competence, which you know is very low. They want to summon the governors of the states, and it is perfectly okay to ask them to come and explain certain things. But to summarize the story, the bottom line is the House of Representatives has an opportunity and a responsibility, and indeed the power to get to the core of the malaise of Nigeria, which is make laws that enshrine resource control. The Zamfara there, they have gold. It doesn't help Zamfarans, ordinary Zamfarans. It doesn't help Nigeria. To the larger, I hear it's being mined out of. The Niger Delta has its own resources. Everywhere has some places, as one of the messages said, some places have solar energy. It is their magic bullet. Let this country stop centralizing power and let everybody become responsible for their welfare, and you will find, I believe, security will massively improve because people will take care of what is theirs and what gives them their revenues and resources. But as long as you want to centralize it, you now want to call, and you are threatening them that they could have their legislative function more or less state of emergency lights in their states because of security. Was that not what any sane person would have said may have even needed a state of emergency, if you want to call it that? But at the end of the day, the House of Representatives is backing up the wrong tree. If there's a security issue, call the security people, have useful conversation with them, fund them appropriately, provide them equipment, and then give proper oversight. The governor has a security vote. The governor is definitely responsible directly for the lives and loss of lives of people in the state. So they have questions to answer. But in security matters, they have no constitutional authority to deploy security forces. So once again, the Nigerian House of Representatives demonstrates that it represents very low reservoirs of common sense or understanding of the legality upon which they sit. I think the governors and the House of Assembly should say, but what will they say when they come down from the bulletproof tinted jeeps and enter the National Assembly? What will they say? Will they bring back the hundreds of lives murdered in the past few weeks? No. What will they come and say? And if the National Assembly is actually take over the state, what will the National Assembly do from Abuja that will be different and better? You see, I just think that these people are trying to enter the headlines for all the wrong reasons. And they are permanently in the headlines for the wrong reasons because they are a waste of Nigeria's resources, in my humble opinion.
Okay, so let me quickly jump in on this. I think the whole idea of an invitation is nonsensical and it's illegal, it's unconstitutional. We're supposed to be a federal system. We run a federal system of governance, which means the governor is answerable to the state House of Assembly. He's not answerable to the House of Representatives. Two, if they do not show up for that summons, are they going to be arrested? Certainly not. They have immunity. You can't arrest them, you can't prosecute them. Now, what is this nonsense about a governor should come to the House of Reps and explain why he should not be removed? Because the nonsense in River State was allowed to stand.
Removed on what basis?
On the basis of insecurity. Why are you picking on Benue and Plateau? Borno has been on fire for the last decade, if not more. Katsina is on fire. Niger is on fire. How are you selecting the states? But more importantly, like I said originally, it is completely illegal. It's unconstitutional. And if I were advising the governors, do not show up there. You have no business there. They have no authority over you. We need to start respecting law and order procedures and processes. And if we don't, what sort of society are we running? And if this is sort of chaotic and unruly society we live in and we are operating, why should any normal, reasonable, sane foreigner come and invest money in this country?
These are the questions. All right,
including Meta, WhatsApp, Instagram, and the other one, Meta 3.
Gilbert Musa says, on the Meta face-off with the federal government, it's a clarion call for projects written in all our tertiary institutions to be carried out in detail by assisting students with required funds to provide alternatives to existing infrastructure rather than abandoning it in the school libraries. Gilbert, it would have been fine if you abandoned the libraries. You find them in the in the trash bins behind faculties and so on and so forth. Yes, I have witnessed that live and direct. They didn't tell me. I have seen projects in the dustbin. So let's make of that what we will. Joseph Meyer says, what period was this 4 trillion naira consumed, according to the Gencos? Ever since the power minister was appointed, he has always been an advocate for tariff increments without any corresponding energy to consumers. We hear they are paying subsidy of millions to whom? It's just fraud and corruption. What happened to fuel subsidy savings? May God bless Nigeria. Uh, Ade in Lagos says, when you build your government on lies, propaganda, eye service, and hypocrisy, you cannot prosper. Imagine more than 7.2 million companies, both private, public, and SME shut down because of the destructive nightmare policies that have turned the people to beggars and Almajiri in the midst of plenty that has turned the nation to a gangster paradise and so on and so forth. Highest children out of school in the world because of school fees and etc. It's a long message, Ade, but thank you for sending it in. Tony in Marine Beach says, if Meta has complied in paying such fines in other crimes and won't threaten to pull out of business in Nigeria, the answer isn't far-fetched. See finish. Apart from not having alternatives, they know very well that laws don't work in this country. Our leaders are culpable in this international ridicule. But for the money tied to the backs of Nigerians drowning in this ocean, governments would have allowed the citizens to drown. Rights of our citizens have been violated in every part of the world. And what did the government do? Ajayi Olunlua says the Nigerian market is too big for Meta to joke with, and our regulators have the right to regulate a lot of the immoral content and adverts our young people are being exposed to on a daily basis. All right. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Very much appreciated. And thank you to you, Mr. C and AB, for joining me this beautiful Monday morning.
Thank you. It's a great start to the week. Let's go out there and be very productive with God behind us. You guys have a wonderful week ahead.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Ayos. Thank you, AB. Nigerians, let's do what we do best. Let's be productive.
Indeed, let's be productive. Let's make it a money-making Monday, as AB would always say. All right, don't go anywhere. Keep it tuned to the Smooth Breakfast right here on Smooth 98.1. We'll take a walk into the locker room at 8:15. It's all about great sporting action. Tega is in, and you know what it is. Fireworks all the way.